winter crops. So keeping the soil, green and armored as much as possible. That helps, sequester carbon through some of the off months. So we have fields now that we're keeping green probably 10 months of the year. And that is a new practice.
Getting the local data is going to be so important. And we need technology, and we need to be able to gather that data to tell our story and to identify the impacts that we're having.
Hi, and welcome to the Ag Podcast. I'm Crystal Mackay, and I'm thrilled to be your host to guide us through some thought-provoking discussions on topics related to agriculture with interesting guests who know farming from the ground up. Farm pun intended. Although I grew up on a farm, I never really heard the term sustainability until I studied agriculture at the University of Guelph. And there we used the term solidly for 4 years. But then it wasn't really commonly used in industry in regular conversations for many decades. We were more comfortable talking about things like best management practices. Fast forward a few decades, and that term is used all the time. We hear sustainability regularly, and there's a new kid in town, regenerative agriculture. So we're here today to discuss it with a couple of really smart guys with different perspectives across our food system. Joining us from my town, Guelph, Ontario, is Tim Faveri. Tim is Vice President of Sustainability and Stakeholder Relations with Nutrien, with a long history in sustainability in groundbreaking programs with companies like Maple Leaf Foods and Tim Hortons. And from Chin, Alberta, the heart of agriculture, we have Chris Perry. He's a fourth generation farmer with Perry Family Farms. Chris has been integrating environmental stewardship and innovative technology on the Perry Family Farm for many years. So welcome to you both. I'm so excited to hear from you and your perspective. Tim, we're going to get started with you. You're the first person I met who had a full-time job in sustainability many moons ago
back in the day,
in our food system. So let's start with the classic question that's often a stumbling block for many people. How do you define sustainability when you're looking at it through an agriculture and food lens?
Oh, that's such a good question. Good to see you again, Crystal.
Yeah, you too.
Doing sustainability for close to 30 years now, I personally often go back to kind of the classic definition around doing things today that won't negatively impact future generations. And I think those people and those companies, for example, that embrace that concept are on the right track. At Nutrien, we're a purposeful company. Our purpose is feeding the future, and that's anchored by the soil beneath everyone's feet and what's important to feed safely and providing food and fiber and fuel to 10 billion people in the future, right? And from an agriculture perspective, I think agriculture needs to thrive for generations to come, and we aim through our programming and our actions to address long-term success through looking through a different lens, a sustainability lens, that of people and the planet and prosperity for our company and for all our stakeholders.
How would you say that is different than regenerative agriculture or the same? What are your thoughts there?
Well, it's interesting. Regenerative agriculture is, like you said, is the new kid on the block. It's been around for a few years. Someone in marketing had a really smart idea, and it seems to have stuck, right? And a lot of it has come from Europe and where they see agriculture should be going in the future. And there's a lot of truth to that in terms of farming practices, etc. We don't like that term actually, because it right off the very beginning, it's saying that agriculture isn't regenerative already, right? And we know that Canadian farmers, Canadian growers have been adopting practices for decades, and are farming quite sustainably. And farming systems are different all over the world. So we like to refer to that as more sustainable and productive agriculture, as opposed to using this new buzzword regenerative. Because what's happening is that these big global brands are saying, well, farmers have to change their practices. Well, what if Canadian farmers already embraced precision agriculture and water management and et cetera? How are they going to participate? And really the engagement that we have with our growers, and particularly around our sustainable ag programs, are kind of what you went back to said around what you said around what are the best practices that we can adopt that are they're going to improve our yield, make us more successful, and have limiting impacts long term on the planet.
I love that. Thank you, Tim. Chris, let's head out to Alberta, one of my favorite places. Tell us a bit about your farm. What do you grow, and how your farm might be considered unique?
We're a fourth generation farmer here. I farm together closely with my brother, and we grow about 5,500 irrigated acres in southern Alberta. So it's it's a wonderful part of the world with irrigation. It lets us do phenomenal things. And Tim mentioned productivity. We get good production out of this area of the world. It's one of the bread baskets. We export a lot of what we produce here out to feed the world. So that's about our area. Where we're heavily potato farmers. So that's our primary focus and crop is potatoes. We grow about 1,600 acres. Our biggest customers are PepsiCo, so through Frito-Lay, and then also McCain Foods, who happens to be right across the road from me. I'm looking out at their new facility, $600 million expansion at the moment. So that's our neck of the woods. And what we do, I guess unique, we have built an on-farm biogas facility, which is a waste management facility. So we basically feed this with about 15 to 20,000 tons of organic waste or a resource a year. So mostly manure, but then our cull potatoes and some processor waste, et cetera, goes into this facility. We steal the energy from that. We produce biogas, which is basically methane, about 60%. We used to run an engine on that and create electricity, renewable baseload. And we produced about 3 times the electricity our entire farm uses. And then all of that goes in, the feedstock that goes in really comes out as a nutrient amendment back to the farm. So very circular economy heavy, and part of our system. So it definitely makes us unique, puts us on the map a little bit for, some of these pieces. My brother is an advisor to the Regenerative Agriculture. I know Tim might not like that, but that is a phrase that's heavily involved in a lot of ESG statements these days for the likes of McCain and PepsiCo. So he is on the advisory council for regenerative agriculture because we include a lot of that practice on our farm ourselves. And then PepsiCo and through Frito-Lay, we produce for Frito-Lay, who has a facility close by as well. So for the potato chip lays, and we do a lot of work with them on their pet positive and really climate aware sort of stuff. So we have a long history of probably on the progressive edge of a lot of the stuff that we do, and we can call it the bleeding edge for sure, because feasibility wise, it hasn't always worked on the economics. But we do a lot of unique work around real early adopters of building soil health and really a holistic picture of what we do. So that's sort of our story there.
I love it. I know lots have changed on farms in the last couple of decades. Can you share some examples of how, if you look back 20 years ago, what you're doing today regarding sustainability, like what's changed, what's new?
Yeah, I would say, I agree with Tim in a way that, the sustainability is an interesting piece, right? An interesting word. And you talk about the generation of terms. So in my mind, and the way to identify regenerative agriculture, I believe it's a heavier focus on really the soil health. So there's a lot of practice that goes into, we think of conservative tillage practice, etc. So really being able to sequester carbon to help build an actual healthy biology in the soil is, in my mind, probably the biggest part of regenerative agriculture. And I would suggest that's probably the biggest changes that we're certainly making, and our whole area and industry is focusing on. So we live in a part of the world where we're green, and we have to produce a heck of a lot of product in about 3 or 4 months before the snow flies and after the snow is finished. And so, that all happens really quick, but what happens on the two ends of that is really significant. So a lot more stuff, really simple practice like winter crops. So keeping the soil, green and armored as much as possible, that helps, sequester carbon through some of the off months. So we have fields now that we're keeping green probably 10 months of the year. And that is a new practice. So stuff like that, from including that to including a lot of organic amendments. And I think that's a privileged part of the world. We're in an area where there's lots of livestock. So manure, sort of heavy, rich opportunities. So we've been putting compost, building our own compost out of feedlot manure for 30 years now and adding it to our rotation. The digestate, which is the part that comes out of the biogas facility, that's pretty unique to us, but lots of opportunity to include more of that, where we're actually grabbing, organic waste that might otherwise go to a landfill, adding that to a nutrient source that goes back to the field is certainly new. And then working with our customers as well, like that's the interesting part of the Regen Ag movement. Through the corporate is, you might consider the tail wagging the dog sort of scenario, but it is working together to figure out best practices, region by region, that help achieve, I think, what we're all after a little bit on the climate aware carbon piece. So
you've got a unique business model with lots of moving parts. So it's interesting to see how that's changed over the years. Tim, speaking of changes over the years, you've been in this sustainability game a long time. Looking back, over the last couple of decades, what do you think's changed? What do you see different?
What I think is most prevalent is now a much bigger focus on agriculture from the entire value chain. Remember 20 years ago, Crystal, when we were having workshops and dialogues, and I remember you saying, this is one of the first times we've had almost the entire value chain in a room, like and talking together. And now there are so many agricultural collaboration groups like CANSA, like Field to Market, and others that really get stakeholders and value chain actors together to pool resources and to identify best practice. And I think that's super important. I can see why McCain and Pepsi have latched on to you, Chris, because you are working in a sustainable or regenerative system. You've created one, right? And I think what's really important is that you share that story with other farmers so that they can learn from that. And that's fantastic if you can be one of these amplifiers for the sector to say, actually, it works, and I can make money from it, and I can reduce my environmental impact, and I can improve my water quality. Like that's all what I think our industry needs to hear. I think the other big thing is around data, because before we never had data. And we're in a world now where if we're going to make a sustainability claim, we're going to need to back it up against a reputable standard and show the positive impact. How many tons of carbon did we reduce or remove, sequester in our soil? Well, that's all pretty nascent technology now and standards. Even, the global IPCC has emissions factors, but they're not regionalized. And we know that environmental impacts are hyperlocal, right? Depends on your soil, depends on the rain. It depends on a whole host of factors, the crop. And those big emissions factors often don't work, right? So getting the local data is going to be so important. And we need technology, and we need to be able to gather that data to tell our story and to identify the impacts that we're having. Plus
I
the
love
fact
that.
that, 20, 30 years ago, I had a lot more hair. Crystal, you know that.
Very stressful times. Yeah.
Yes.
Before we shift gears, if you've liked what you've heard so far, please like and subscribe and share this podcast within your circles and leave a comment. We'd love to hear from you. Chris, what kind of obstacles were in your way to adapt some of these practices? Because why isn't everyone doing what you do?
In the farming community, we do have an ability to get a lot of stuff done that happens. So, and regulations do come down. And I think, Tim could probably speak more almost on the synthetic fertilizer chemical as a mature industry. There's a lot of regulation in place to deal with that and get proper stuff out there. The interesting part about the regenerative, and probably the reason that Tim, doesn't maybe like that, is there's a lot more natural organic pieces that come in that complicate that system, because what's allowed, what isn't. That being said, like I'll get on a tangent here, hoping you can get me back online, but I think there's such a room for a balance between the two. There's never been one or the other in my mind. I think we have an incredible opportunity, and we need the Nutriens of the world to help, do stuff like we're doing, or value adding exactly what we're doing and combining what they're doing to reach productivity goals for where we want to get to. So I think that's really important. The biogas, like I'm the chair in the Canadian Biogas Association. And so we do a ton of work in trying to build out this network across Canada, really. We sold part of our facility to Evergen, which is it's a public company that has basically trying to do that, build what they call a biogas, or a renewable natural gas. It's all kind of the same thing, platform across Canada. And there's a heap of opportunity in the agricultural sector to do that, which is, one of the reasons I believe that CANZA, the Canadian Alliance for Net Zero Agriculture, has come up with this, two things on climate aware and digesters. The digester regulatory hurdle is incredible in Canada right now. Our neighbors to the south are getting incentivized both economically through the IRA, the Inflation Reductions Act, and investment tax credit pieces that we are not able to match in Canada. I mean, not able to, we could, but we certainly haven't. So we've lost some investment there. And then the other piece of that is just the regulatory hurdle. So understanding, okay, we want to do this, but we want to do it right. And how do we do it right? And we have everything from provincial jurisdiction to municipal, regulation to federal regulation that all plays in, that really complicates where a lot of the opportunity for some of the stuff that we're doing lies, in why, unless that really does change from a farmer producer perspective, we just aren't going to see the uptake in it. So, I think we got to be careful on food safety is a real thing. We deal with a perfect example on our digester. We deal with, our customers like PepsiCo and McCain love the digester from the top corporate level. We can go to, COP, we can go to wherever and talk about GHG reductions and the waste energy and everything, which is all fantastic. You talk to the people that are talking the food safety in McCain's and PepsiCo, they're very nervous about what we do, because we're bringing in an organic and a waste, and what could actually happen in that food chain to, make somebody sick or do something different. So there's a real fine balance between understanding that. So we have to do it right and properly, and be aware of all those pieces. But yet the fear of doing it wrong almost stops a lot of projects before they even get started. There's 8,000 facilities like what we do in Germany on the ground, very similar. They've been in place since the 80s is when they started that. So it's not brand new, but we treat it like it's brand new, and every jurisdiction wants to regulate it according to their, interests and risk aversion. And that's the biggest hurdle, hands down.
And we're going to actually do a full episode on biodigesters, and food waste is a whole other ballgame.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
we'll definitely be referencing some of the things you talked about there. You're both coming at this topic from different desks and viewpoints, I would say, but just with such interesting perspectives. You're obviously both really passionate about this. I'm curious, Tim, you've been working in this sustainability game for many years with lots of wins wins, but I'm sure lots of frustrations as well. What keeps you motivated? Like, what gets you out of bed in the morning to talk about this stuff?
I think it's the progress that I can see for any company that I've worked with. You know, you come into an organization and you see areas of opportunities where you can improve, and support a business, grow a business. I also think, you know, and as Chris articulated, it's changing all the time, and sometimes it's not quick, right? It's a long-term game, this thing called sustainability. But if you're on this journey and you know and you're seeing incremental improvements, that's a good thing. And then when you cast back 10 years, like, wow, look what we've done, look what we built, right? And working for Nutrien, who's so big, and has a global footprint, those opportunities in my eyes are endless, right? And the best practice sharing is phenomenal across our retail network and across our fertilizer business as well.
Well, and reflecting back on some of our early meetings, getting the food system in the room together, which had not happened before. You know, the supply chain was designed for competition, not collaboration. So now that it's normal practice, we actually have collaborative efforts. Is that alone is a huge victory that not every country enjoys, right?
We participate in those big global events to keep the opinions and keep the voice of the farmer relevant, because these big global standard setters are developing, you know, science-based targets, whatever, in a vacuum without input from agriculture. And it's fascinating. You go to these big conferences and they say, okay, this is a big agriculture, you know, value chain panel, and there's not even a farmer on the panel, or let alone a farmer. There's no one from crop input, right? And so we really have to educate the world and policymakers, as you suggested, and governments and standard setters, on that there's a whole upstream piece here of the agricultural value chain, that has a really important piece to play in sustainability.
Well said. I mean, you know, I've often said, well, farmers are busy farming, other people are talking about it. So that's why having people like Chris and Tim at the table in these conversations are just so important, you know, with real experience and, you know, some dirt under your nails to say, you know, this is how this plays out, you know, trying to avoid some of those unintended consequences, you know, all those things. Chris, jump in. I want to hear from you.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate what Tim said earlier in the conversation is, you know, getting all people in a room like this association, like a Kanza, or having, you know, the McDonald's in the room to talk, and the Frito-Lays, the Nutriens, like this whole value chain, and having some good discussions across those platforms is really important. And I don't know, Tim, if you agree, but I feel like that is coming to light a little bit more. Like, I think, you know, I look back 15 years ago and we weren't really you know, McDonald's, for example, whatever we say, they deal directly with a heap of customers, right? So having them talk directly to farmers on our side is important, and that is happening more, you know, or the Walmarts or the Loblaws or whatever of the worlds that are in a little bit more direct relation. Really, it comes back to, holy cow, this production is a huge part of our chain, and we need to include the people that are on the ground doing that. So I think part of this is because of that directly. So, and you know, that regenerative agriculture, I'll just throw that out really quick, but it is interesting because we talked about that. We love the term because sustainability in our mind kind of went away, and we thought, oh, this is so more applicable to us. And you know what happened within 1 year, you know, every corporation is touting their regenerative agriculture as opposed to a sustainability sort of platform, because it does, you know, it has that new ring, it has that niche, but it's one of those things. Like they said, okay, we're regenerative agriculture, and to Tim's point, to challenge defining that, they're all defining it a little bit differently.
Yeah.
So what does it actually mean too is an interesting conversation. But I think the conversations are being had, and it is a very good direction, and I'm really happy that it's going the way it's going.
So, Chris, just continuing on that line of thinking, we just finished a little thing we like to call planting in the East, and you might call seeding in the West, because we're weird that way. What's your motivation? You know, farming, it's tough work. Mother Nature's a fickle boss, despite all our technology and, GPS and whatever you have. You still wake up in the morning and check the rain gauge. Keeps you going? What's your personal motivation?
Yeah, I think, it's in the nature of a farmer to think generationally. We sat down in a room and Frito-Lay recently, and they sat around and we said, okay, how many people have been doing this for, 10 years, and everybody that hasn't sit down, and you look who's standing up in the room, it's all the farmers. So on the corporate side, everybody that's been there has been there for a very small amount of time. And we've seen people come and go, and we're still growing potatoes for that organization through probably 5 generations on their side of different people. And it's our same family that's doing exactly what we've been doing and trying to do a really good job of. So I think we think generationally. And so absolutely, like, one of our goals on the farm is to leave the land in better shape than when we received it, for my brother and I. Right. So that's where regenerative agriculture, my definition, in my own mind at the moment, is just, really building that soil health, making sure that we're adding to the balance, not taking away. And so, it is the next generation. We have a bunch of kids in the mix. I'm not sure if mine are coming back yet or not. It's going to be a really interesting decade, but I hope so. And the intent is, man, let's do this right. And it is really a passion for best practice. We're definitely on the edge of that. Some people think we're crazy. The economic feasibility is being touted as it's going to save you money. It doesn't really, but to Tim's point, what we really need to be aware of is the productivity. So, being productive while, not taking away from, and then it's not just the land, it's not just the soil, it's the water. What's the water like in your area? What takes to the inputs and all that on just creating that balance. So I love doing it right and feeling good about that, on, looking the kids in the face and in the eyes and saying, hey, there's a good thing for you guys to come home here. We've built up, and it's a viable, healthy, growing farm. And so we hope some more of them are coming back. We'll tell you in 10 years.
Yeah, absolutely. Tim talked about this being the long game, and farming is the ultimate long game, multi-generational long game, right? So sadly, we're running out of time. I could sit and chat with you two for hours. One rapid fire quick question. We have a magic wand. You can give a piece of advice to every farmer in Canada. What would you want to say when it comes to sustainability?
I want to pick up one of Chris's word, and that's balance. It's a balance sheet, as you described, Chris. You can't put more in and get more out unless there's a balance there, or vice versa. So think about balance, and think about we again, Crystal, this. We need to tell our stories in this industry a lot better, and farmers like Chris and others that are doing best practice. Let's tell our stories and educate our communities and the world on the incredible things that agriculture is doing in Canada, for sure.
Love it. Thanks, Tim. And Chris, magic wand, piece of advice for every farmer in Canada.
And I think Tim did a great job there. I was going to say, tell our stories. Everybody, across that is succeeding in the industry has a good story to tell. And I'm with Tim. Like, we're further removed from our end customer all the time, a percentage that's really tied into the farm. And so it is important to keep, the communication going. It's important to talk about the good things that we're doing, and that we're very aware of the, what the finger is getting pointed at, and our hotspots that we need to be concerned about in our industry. We are aware, and we mitigate to the very best we can, I think, and do a good job. So, and Tim mentioned the balance, but I'll just say the same thing. Share the stories, and keep informed with the public, and do what we can to learn back and forth, and not be closed-minded, to be able to listen there's a lot of different ways to do things. And I think our whole world is going where it feels like it should only be one way, and there's lots of ways. So keep your ears open. Let's keep learning together.
Yeah, more of a conversation than a lecture for sure, which is near and dear to my heart. That's where I spend lots of my time. I'm sorry I got to wrap it up, but I'd really like to sincerely thank you both for sharing your insights with us today on sustainability, regenerative agriculture, call it what you will, this commitment to people and the planet and with a future in mind. We really appreciate your genuine commitment to this topic and what you're doing in your respective fields, and we appreciate you as humans that are dedicated to this space. Thanks for watching and listening. We will be adding some resources to the show notes on YouTube, so please check it out and share.